I moved to a rural town with a small lakeside community, seeking peace and inspiration for my photography. The quiet, misty mornings and tranquil waters seemed perfect for my work. My cat Whiskers and I settled into a cozy cottage. The neighbors were friendly enough, but very nosy. They offered to watch Whiskers while I traveled for work on assignment. They, themselves, owned several B&Bs and assured me that many residents traveled to winter homes for months at a time, and our lake was safe. Trusting their kindness, I allowed them into my home while I was away. My neighbors were an odd bunch. An overly friendly elderly couple, their bossy middle-aged daughter, and her creepy husband, who always seemed to be lurking around. The elderly mother, Mrs. Crowley, was pushy in her friendliness, often inviting herself over. Mr. Crowley, her husband, was equally intrusive. Their daughter, Emily, commanded the household with a sharp tongue, and her husband, Tom, did whatever Emily demanded. I noticed Tom sneaking out of the house late at night, more often than I cared to see. Nights in the town were eerie, but the lake was altogether another creature. The fog rolled in thick, and the deafening chorus of crickets and frogs was unnerving at times when, as far as you can see, everything is pitch black. In the distance, there was a faint noise of the train passing. Late one night, as I lay in bed, I heard a knock at the door. My heart pounded as I went to answer it, but no one was there. I started to feel that something was terribly wrong in this seemingly quaint community. The lake, once my sanctuary, began to feel ominous. The fog over the water was thicker than ever, and strange noises echoed through the mist. I began to see things, ghostly figures that appeared in my photographs of the lake. Their expressions were angry and full of sorrow. I realized the land was haunted, and the spirits were not at peace. One evening, I spread my recent photographs over the kitchen table. In nearly every shot, I saw ghostly figures, some distant, others terrifyingly close. Their faces were twisted in anger, their eyes pleading. I knew I had captured something beyond the physical world. The realization added to the already building sense of dread. I decided to install security cameras around my house. But soon I felt a deeper intrusion. Unable to sleep, tossing and turning, I noticed a blinking red light in the wall electrical outlet. I discovered that someone had installed their own camera and was watching me sleep. Disgusted and terrified, I knew I had to protect myself. I bought a shotgun and kept it within reach. Whiskers started acting strangely. He would hiss at corners of the room and refuse to enter certain areas. One night, I heard someone whisper my name while I slept. I woke up, but no one was there. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I realized I was not alone. The neighborhood cats began disappearing, and the silence in the neighborhood grew unnerving. I walked by the B&B cabins, noticing that they always seemed empty. Where were all the tourists? While photographing one of the cabins, I found a familiar-looking bracelet in the grass. Later, I remembered that one of the ghostly images in my photos wore the same bracelet. When I showed it to the Crawleys, their faces turned pale with fear. That night, at 3 a.m., I heard a knock at my patio door. I walked through the dark house, shotgun in hand, and saw the doorknob turning. Someone was opening the door. I flipped on the lights, and there stood Tom, looking surprised. He claimed they heard a scream and came to check on me. But before I could respond, he lunged at me, and in the struggle, I dropped the shotgun, and I could see that the whole family was there. He dragged me out of the house and threw me down the porch steps. We wrestled in the gravel, and I managed to knee him in the groin. As I stood to run, Mrs. Crowley appeared and grabbed my hair. I spun around and shoved her down into the gravel, freeing myself and sprinting towards the dock. I untied my small boat and pushed off into the fog-covered lake. My heart raced as I rowed frantically, the sounds of the Crowleys' shouts fading into the distance. I floated there, alone in the darkness, waiting for dawn. The fog was so thick I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I heard the crickets and frogs again, their chorus a haunting soundtrack to my fear. As the sun began to rise, the fog slowly lifted. In the distance, I saw lights and heard the wail of sirens. The police were calling to me from the shore. An anonymous tip had brought them here. They had searched the Crowleys' house and found body parts in the freezers. The Crowleys had fled, leaving everything behind. The authorities helped me back to shore, their faces grave with the horrors they had uncovered. They told me the Crowleys had been using the bed and breakfasts as a cover for their gruesome deeds, preying on unsuspecting tourists. The specters I had captured in my photographs were their victims, haunting the land, seeking justice. I still live on the lake. Even though some memories are horrific, the cat and I are making new ones. Stray kittens are everywhere now, thanks to Whiskers, and the land seems somewhat calmer now. I definitely don't eat the fish, though. I realized that the night I spent on the boat, a shroud of fog hid me from the real monsters. Should the neighbors return? Well, let's just say that I have a few surprises for them. Now and then, I get the feeling of being watched, or a whisper in the dark. The images of those angry, sorrowful specters are burned into my mind, a constant reminder of the terror I escaped.